The village of Dharmapura sat high in the mountains where mist rolled through bamboo groves like slow rivers. Oil lamps flickered in stone houses. The wind hummed soft songs through the trees. In this quiet place lived an old tailor named Elias. His workshop was a small wooden shack beside the temple road. Inside, it smelled of rain-soaked cloth and candle wax. Elias was old now. His hair had turned white as cotton. His eyes were weak, but his hands were still steady. Every evening, he sat by his lantern and sewed. The villagers brought him torn clothes to mend. Some paid with bread. Others gave him candles or blessings. Elias never asked for money. He believed kindness was more valuable than gold. But something strange had begun to happen. Every night, someone left bundles of old clothes at his door. These are not ordinary clothes. They were ancient robes made of silk. Some had gold thread woven into them. They smelled faintly of smoke and flowers. Elias did not know who left them. He never saw anyone. But he mended them anyway, thinking they belonged to poor travelers or pilgrims passing through the mountains. He did not know the truth yet. He did not know he was sewing clothes for ghosts. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. Thunder cracked across the sky. Rain pounded the roof of Elias's workshop. He sat hunched over his sewing table, working on a robe that had been left at his door the night before. The fabric was strange. It felt softer than anything he had ever touched. It shimmered in the candlelight like water. Elias's needle moved in and out, pulling thread through the ancient cloth. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the room. The candle flame flickered wildly, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. Elias sat very still. His heart beat fast in his chest. He reached for his matchbox with shaking hands. He struck a match. The flames sparked to life. When the light returned, Elias gasped. The robe he had been mending was finished. Every tear was closed. Every stitch was perfect, but he had not finished it himself. "Who did this?" he whispered into the darkness. No one answered. The workshop was silent except for the rain drumming on the roof. Elias stood slowly and walked to the door. He opened it and looked outside. The street was empty, but in the wet mud he saw something that made his blood run cold. Footprints. Small, bare footprints leading away from his door and disappearing into the mist. Morning came with temple bells ringing across the valley. Elias woke, feeling tired. He had barely slept after what happened the night before. He opened his shop as usual. Villagers came with torn shirts, old shawls, and children's clothes. Elias greeted them with a smile and accepted whatever they could give in return. His neighbor, Mira, stopped by with a basket of rice cakes. She was a sharp woman with a loud voice and a kind heart. "You look terrible," she said, setting the basket down. "Are you sick?" "I am fine," Elias replied softly. "Just tired." Mira folded her arms. "You work too much for too little. You sew for people who give you nothing. You will starve yourself into the grave." Elias smiled. "Cloth remembers kindness, Mira. That is payment enough." Mira shook her head, but said nothing more. She left him with the rice cakes and a warning to rest. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Elias locked his door and prepared for bed. But before he could blow out his candle, he heard a soft thud outside. He opened the door carefully. There, on his doorstep, was another bundle of old clothes. This one was wrapped in faded cloth and tied with string. Elias knelt down and untied it. Inside was a robe covered in strange symbols he had never seen before. Elias brought the robe inside and laid it across his work table. He lit 2 candles to see better. The fabric was impossibly soft, like touching a cloud. It smelled of sandalwood and old smoke, as if it had been burned in a temple long ago. The symbols stitched into the robe looked ancient. They curved and twisted like vines. Elias traced them with his finger, wondering what they meant. He picked up his needle and thread. His hands moved carefully, mending the torn edges. As he worked, he felt something strange. The air around him grew colder. The candles flickered even though there was no wind. Elias looked up. Nothing had changed, but he felt eyes watching him. Invisible eyes from somewhere he could not see. "Who are you?" he whispered. No answer came. only the sound of his needle pushing through cloth. He worked through the night. By the time he finished, the sky was turning gray with dawn. Elias folded the robe carefully and placed it near the door. As he did, something strange happened. The robe glowed softly for just a moment, then returned to normal. Elias stepped back, his heart pounding. Outside, he heard the faint sound of a child laughing. But when he looked out the window, the street was empty. No children were awake at this hour. Days passed. Elias continued his quiet work. Every evening, another bundle appeared at his door. Every night, he mended the clothes and felt the strange coldness in the air. One morning, while fetching water from the village well, Elias saw something unusual. Deep in the forest beyond the temple, small lights floated between the trees. They looked like lanterns, but they moved on their own, drifting slowly through the mist. An old farmer, standing nearby, noticed Elias staring. "You see them too?" the man asked. "What are they?" Elias replied. The farmer shrugged. "People say it is the wind carrying prayers to heaven. But my grandmother used to say they were the dead, walking when the living forget them." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He carried his water bucket home in silence. That night, as he sat sewing, he heard footsteps outside. Slow, soft footsteps. They stopped right in front of his door. Elias held his breath. The footsteps did not move. He waited. Then, slowly, he stood and walked to the door. His hand touched the handle. He pulled it open quickly. No one was there. But across the street, one of those floating lanterns hovered in the air, glowing softly. It stayed for a moment, as if looking at him. Then it vanished into the mist. That night, Elias could not sleep. He kept thinking about the floating lantern. He kept wondering who left the clothes at his door. His mind was full of questions with no answers. He lay in his small bed, staring at the ceiling. The wind whistled through cracks in the walls. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Then he heard it. A voice, soft and sorrowful, like someone crying far away. Elias sat up. The voice came from outside his door. He wrapped a shawl around his shoulders and walked slowly to the window. He looked out. A figure stood in the street. It was wrapped in a dark cloak. But something was wrong. The figure did not touch the ground. It hovered just above the dirt road, like smoke frozen in the shape of a person. Elias's breath caught in his throat. His hands gripped the windowsill. The figure turned its head toward him. Its face was hidden in shadow, but its voice reached him clearly. "Your stitches bind what the earth cannot hold," it whispered. Elias blinked. When he opened his eyes again, the figure was gone. He rushed to the door and threw it open. The street was empty, but something lay on his doorstep. A small golden thimble, old and worn. Elias picked it up carefully. His heart stopped. Carved into the side were his mother's initials. Elias turned the golden thimble over in his hands. His mother had owned one just like this. She had used it every day when she taught him to sew as a boy, but she had been buried with it 20 years ago. How was it here now? His hands trembled. He placed the thimble on his table and stared at it for a long time. Sleep would not come that night. The next evening, another bundle arrived. This time, the cloth was heavier. Elias unwrapped it and found a long robe embroidered with silver thread. It was beautiful, but very old. He began to mend it. As his needle pushed through the fabric, he accidentally pricked his finger. A drop of blood fell onto the cloth. Elias reached for a rag to wipe it away. But the blood did not stain the fabric. Instead, it sank into the cloth and disappeared, as if the robe had swallowed it. Elias pulled his hand back in shock. His fingers still bled, but the cloth was clean. Not a single red mark remained. That night, as he finished the last stitch, the robe began to whisper. Faint voices rose from the fabric, so quiet he almost thought he imagined them. "Thank you," the voices said. "Thank you." Elias dropped his needle. His breath came fast and shallow. Fear and wonder fought inside his chest. He did not know whether to run or to pray. The next morning, Mira came knocking at his door. Her face was pale and her eyes were wide with fear. "Elias," she said urgently, "come outside. Now." He followed her into the street. A small crowd had gathered near the temple graveyard. They were all staring at the ground. Mira pointed. "Look, footprints. Dozens of them. Bare feet, walking in a long line from Elias's shop straight into the graveyard. But these are not normal footprints. They glowed faintly in the dirt, as if made by feet dipped in moonlight. "What is this?" someone whispered. An old woman crossed herself. "Spirits," she said. "The dead are walking." All eyes turned to Elias. Mira grabbed his arm. "What have you been doing, old man? What have you brought into this village?" Elias had no answer. He stared at the glowing footprints and felt his stomach twist with fear. The village priest arrived, his robes swishing as he walked. He looked at the footprints, then at Elias. His voice was stern. "You must stop whatever you are doing," the priest said. "You are inviting spirits into Dharmapura. This is dangerous." But an old widow stepped forward. Her voice was soft but firm. "He mended my husband's funeral shawl last month. That night, I dreamt my husband smiled at me for the first time in years. Elias has done no harm." The crowd murmured. Some agreed. Others shook their heads. Elias returned to his workshop, his heart heavy. The villager's words echoed in his mind. Was he truly inviting danger? Or was he helping souls who had been forgotten? He did not know, but he could not stop. Something inside him whispered that this work was important. That evening, he waited for the next bundle of clothes. The sun set. Stars appeared. The moon rose high, but no bundle came. Elias sat by his door, waiting. Hours passed. Still nothing. The next night, the same. No clothes. No visitors. Only silence. For 6 nights, his doorstep remained empty. Elias felt a strange sadness, as if he had lost something precious. The air no longer felt cold. The whispers were gone. On the 7th night, as Elias prepared to go to bed, he heard a soft sound outside. He rushed to the door and opened it. No bundle of clothes lay there. Instead, there was a single folded letter. It was sealed with a thread made of gold. Elias's hands shook as he picked it up. He brought it inside and carefully broke the seal. The letter unfolded in his hands. The words were written in beautiful script that seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight. It read, "You have mended what we could not. One final garment awaits. Follow the lanterns before dawn." Elias read the letter 3 times. His heart pounded. Follow the lanterns? Where? Elias showed the letter to Mira the next morning. She read it, and her face went pale. "Do not go," she said firmly. "This is a trap. Spirits will lead you into the forest, and you will never return." "But what if they need help?" Elias asked. "You are an old man, not a saint," Mira snapped. "Let the dead rest. Stay with the living." Elias nodded, but he knew he would go. Something in his heart told him this was his purpose. That night, as the village slept, Elias wrapped himself in his warmest shawl. He took his sewing kit, the golden thimble, and a small lantern. He stepped outside. The street was dark and silent. Fog rolled down from the mountains, thick and cold. Elias walked toward the edge of the village, where the forest began. Then he saw them, small, glowing lanterns floating between the trees. They moved slowly, as if waiting for him. Elias took a deep breath and stepped forward. The lanterns drifted ahead, leading him deeper into the forest. The path was narrow and covered in fallen leaves. Branches reached out like fingers. As he walked, Elias heard whispers all around him. Soft voices calling from a mist. "Chosen, chosen." His legs trembled, but he kept walking. The lanterns glowed brighter with every step, lighting his way through the darkness. The forest grew thicker. Trees pressed close on both sides. The fog was so thick Elias could barely see his own feet. But the lanterns kept moving, glowing like small suns in the darkness. Elias walked for what felt like hours. His legs ached. His breath came in short gasps. But he did not stop. Then, suddenly, the lanterns stopped. They hovered in a circle around a strange archway made of twisted tree roots. Beyond the archway, the mist glowed with a pale blue light. Elias stepped closer. The air felt different here. It hummed softly, like the sound of a distant song. He reached out and touched the roots. They were warm. He looked back at the path behind him. It had disappeared into fog. There was no way back now, only forward. Elias closed his eyes, said a quick prayer, and stepped through the archway. The world changed. When he opened his eyes, he stood in a place that looked like Dharmapura, but it was not the same. The buildings were there. The temple road was there. Even his own workshop stood in its usual place. But everything was frozen in twilight. The sky was neither day nor night. No bird sang. No wind blew. The streets were empty and silent. Elias walked slowly down the road. His footsteps echoed strangely, as if the ground beneath him was hollow. Then he saw something that made him stop. Light glowed from inside his workshop. Elias walked toward his workshop. The door was open. Light spilled out into the ghostly street. He stepped inside carefully. What he saw made his heart skip. A younger version of himself sat at the sewing table, bent over a piece of cloth. The young Elias's hands moved steadily, needle flashing in the candlelight. The old Elias stepped closer. "Hello," he whispered. The young version did not hear him. He kept sewing, unaware he was being watched. Old Elias reached out to touch his younger self's shoulder. His hand passed through like smoke. This was not real. This was a memory, a reflection of the past trapped in this strange place. "You see yourself as you were," a voice said softly behind him. Elias spun around. A woman stood in the doorway. She was wrapped in mist, her face calm and sorrowful. Her eyes shimmered like dew on grass. "Who are you?" Elias asked, his voice shaking. "I am no one," the woman said, "and I am everyone you have helped. You stitched the veil between the living and the forgotten. You mended what the world left torn." Elias did not understand. "What do you mean?" The woman stepped closer. "Every soul you helped find peace. Every garment you repaired carried a spirit who could not rest. Your kindness closed their wounds." Elias felt tears rise in his eyes. "I do not know." "We know," the woman said gently. "But one tear remains. One final wound that must be closed." She held out her hands. In them lay a robe made of light itself. It shimmered and glowed, but it was unfinished. Threads hung loose at the edges. "This is the last garment," she whispered. "But to complete it, you must give something of yourself. A thread from your own past." Elias stared at the glowing robe. "What must I give?" The woman's eyes filled with sadness. "The scarf your mother gave you, the one buried with her. It holds the thread of love and memory. Without it, the souls cannot rest." Elias's breath caught. His mother's scarf, the one thing he had left of her. Elias stood frozen. His mother's scarf was buried with her in the temple graveyard. It was the last gift she had given him before she died. He had placed it in her hands himself 20 years ago. "I must dig up her grave?" Elias whispered. The woman nodded. "Before dawn, if you do not return in time, both worlds will remain torn. The living and the dead will walk together, and neither will find peace." Elias felt fear grip his chest, but he also felt something else. Purpose. "I will do it," he said. The woman smiled sadly. "Then go now. Time moves differently here. What feels like hours in this place is only moments in yours." But dawn comes quickly. She stepped aside. Behind her, the archway of roots reappeared, glowing faintly. Elias ran. He ran faster than his old legs should have carried him. He passed through the archway and stumbled back into the forest. The lanterns guided him again, rushing ahead as if they understood the urgency. Branches tore at his clothes. His lungs burned, but he did not stop. Finally, he burst out of the forest and into the sleeping village. The sky was still dark, but the first hint of gray touched the horizon. Dawn was coming. Elias ran to the temple graveyard. His hands shook as he knelt beside his mother's grave. The stone was old and covered in moss. "Forgive me, mother," he whispered. He began to dig. The dirt was hard and cold. Elias's fingers bled as he clawed at the earth. He had no shovel, only his hands and his desperation. He dug deeper. Sweat poured down his face. His breath came in ragged gasps. The sky grew lighter. The stars began to fade. "Please," he whispered, "please let me find it." His fingers hit something soft. Cloth. He dug faster, pulling the dirt away. There, wrapped carefully around his mother's bones, was the scarf. It was faded and old, but still whole. Elias lifted it gently, tears streaming down his face. The fabric was soft in his hands, just as he remembered. He held it to his chest and wept. "I am sorry, mother," he said through his tears, "but I must use this to help others. You taught me kindness. You You taught me to sow for love, not for gold. I know you would understand. The wind blew softly, as if answering him. Elias stood, clutching the scarf. The sky was turning pink. Dawn was almost here. He had no time. He ran. His old legs trembled. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. But he ran toward the forest, toward the archway, toward the world of mist and spirits. The ground shook beneath him. The air felt heavy, as if the two worlds were pulling apart. Elias stumbled and fell. The scarf slipped from his hands. "No," he cried, reaching for it. Then he felt it. Soft hands, invisible but real, lifting him gently, guiding him forward. The hands carried him through the forest. The lanterns blazed brighter than ever, lighting the path like daylight. Elias could not see who held him, but he felt their kindness. They brought him to the archway. The roots glowed with golden light. Elias clutched his mother's scarf tightly and stepped through. He was back in a world of twilight. But now it was different. The streets were no longer empty. Figures stood everywhere, silent and watching. They were dressed in the robes Elias had mended. Men, women, children, all waiting. The woman in mist appeared again. "You have returned," she said. "Now come. We do not have much time." She led him to a vast hall made entirely of light. The walls shimmered like water. The ceiling stretched endlessly upward. In the center of the hall stood hundreds of souls, all dressed in the garments Elias had sewn. They turned to look at him. Their faces were peaceful, but their eyes were filled with longing. "These are the forgotten," the woman said, "those who died with pain in their hearts. Your stitches gave them comfort. Your kindness gave them hope. But they cannot move on until the final thread is sewn." She led Elias to a table in the center of the hall. On it lay the glowing robe, unfinished and waiting. "Use the scarf," she whispered. "Weave it into the robe. Let your mother's love become the thread that binds us all." Elias nodded. His hands trembled as he laid the scarf beside the robe. He picked up his needle, and he began to sew. Elias worked faster than he had ever worked before. His needle flashed in the light as he wove his mother's scarf into the glowing robe. Every stitch felt important. Every thread carried weight. As he sewed, something strange happened. The hall began to fill with voices. Whispers at first, then laughter, then tears. The souls around him were speaking, remembering their lives. A woman's voice said, "I died alone, but his stitches made me feel remembered." A man's voice said, "I was forgotten by my children, but his kindness gave me peace." A child's voice said, "I was scared of the dark, but his thread brought me light." Elias's eyes filled with tears, but he did not stop. His hands moved steadily, pulling the golden thread through the fabric. The scarf slowly disappeared into the robe, becoming part of something greater. The sky outside the hall began to change. The twilight lifted. A soft pink light spread across the horizon. "Dawn is coming," the woman whispered. "Hurry." Elias tied the final knot. His fingers trembled as he cut the thread. The robe was finished. It blazed with light, so bright Elias had to shield his eyes. The souls in the hall gasped. Some fell to their knees. Others reached out their hands toward the light. The woman stepped forward. Her face was no longer sad. She smiled. "Now wear it," she said softly. Elias hesitated. "Wear it? But this is for the souls. Not for me." The woman shook her head. "The robe is made of kindness. Only the one who sewed it can release its power. Put it on, Elias. Set us free." Elias stood slowly. His hands shook as he lifted the glowing robe. It was warm to the touch, like holding sunlight. He slipped it over his shoulders. The moment the robe touched him, everything changed. Light burst from his chest. It spread outward in waves, filling the hall, pouring through the windows, rushing into every corner of the twilight world. Elias felt his body grow lighter. His arms became translucent, half solid, half light. The souls around him began to glow. One by one, they lifted off the ground, their faces filled with joy. Tears of relief streamed down their cheeks. "Thank you," they whispered. "Thank you." The woman in mist stepped closer. Her form began to fade. "You gave us what the world could not. Peace, rest, memory." Elias watched as the souls rose higher and higher, their bodies turning into streams of golden light. They flowed upward like rivers in the sky, disappearing into the dawn. The hall emptied. The light faded. Elias stood alone, still wearing the glowing robe. His body flickered between solid and transparent. He looked down at his hands. They were disappearing. "What is happening to me?" he whispered. The mist swirled around him. The hall dissolved. Elias found himself standing in a garden filled with white flowers. The air smelled sweet, like jasmine and rain. A figure walked toward him through the flowers. Elias's breath stopped. It was his mother. She looked just as he remembered. Her face was kind. Her eyes were warm. She smiled at him the way she used to when he was a boy. "Mother!" Elias whispered, his voice breaking. She opened her arms. Elias ran to her and fell into her embrace. He wept like a child. All the years of loneliness, all the nights of solitude poured out of him. "You have done well, my son," she said softly, stroking his hair. "You have sown peace where pain once lived. You have mended the broken world." "I used your scarf," Elias said through his tears. "I'm sorry." His mother smiled. "Do not be sorry. That scarf was always meant to bring comfort. First to me, then to you, and now to all these souls. It has fulfilled its purpose." She pulled back and looked into his eyes. "But now you must choose, Elias. You can stay here with me, in this place of rest, or you can return to the living world. There are still tears to mend, still broken hearts that need your kindness." Elias looked around. The garden was beautiful, peaceful. He could rest here forever. But then he thought of Dharmapura. He thought of Mira. He thought of the villagers who brought him torn clothes and trusted him to fix them. "I must go back," he said quietly. "The world still needs its tailor." His mother's smile widened. "I knew you would say that." She reached into her robe and pulled out a spool of golden thread. "Take this, for the souls who still wait." Elias took the spool. It was warm and hummed softly in his hand. His mother kissed his forehead. "Go now, my son. And remember, kindness never dies. It only changes who it dresses." The garden faded. Elias felt himself falling, spinning through light and mist. The robe around him blazed brighter and brighter until he could see nothing but white. Then, suddenly everything stopped. Elias opened his eyes. He was lying on the ground at the edge of the forest. The sun was rising over the mountains. Birds sang in the trees. The village of Dharmapura spread out below him, waking to a new day. He sat up slowly. His body felt heavy again, solid. The glowing robe was gone. In its place, he wore his old coat, patched and worn. But in his hand, he still held the spool of golden thread. Elias stood and walked back to the village. His legs were tired, but his heart felt light. As he walked down the temple road, he saw Mira standing outside his workshop. Her face was pale with worry. "Elias," she cried when she saw him. She ran to him and grabbed his shoulders. "Where have you been? I looked for you all night. I thought you were dead." Elias smiled gently. "I was helping some old friends." Mira stared at him as if he had gone mad. But then she noticed something. His workshop, which had always been small and dark, now glowed softly from within. Warm light spilled out through the cracks in the walls. "What happened to your shop?" she whispered. Elias walked to the door and pushed it open. Inside, everything had changed. The workshop was transformed. The walls, once cracked and stained, now looked new. The floor was clean. Shelves lined with colorful thread stood neatly against the walls. And in the center of the room, his old sewing machine hummed softly, moving on its own. Mira stepped inside, her mouth open in shock. "How is this possible?" Elias did not answer. He walked to his table and set down the spool of golden thread. As soon as it touched the wood, the thread began to glow. On the table lay a pile of torn clothes. Shirts, dresses, children's pants, all brought by villagers who needed help. But now, as Elias and Mira watched, the sewing machine began to work by itself. The needle moved up and down. The thread wove through the fabric. One by one, the torn clothes were mended, each stitch glowing faintly with golden light. Mira backed toward the door, her eyes wide. "What magic is this?" Elias smiled. "Not magic, kindness." He picked up one of the mended shirts. It was warm to the touch. He held out to Mira. Give this to the widow on the hill. Tell her it carries a blessing. Mira took the shirt carefully, as if it might burn her. She looked at Elias with new eyes. You have changed, old man. What happened to you in that forest? Elias sat down in his chair and looked out the window at the rising sun. I learned that every stitch matters. Every act of kindness lives on, even after we are gone. Word spread quickly through Dharmapura. People whispered about the tailor's glowing workshop. Some said it was blessed by the gods. Others said spirits had rewarded his kindness. Villagers who once mocked Elias now came to his door with respect. They brought clothes not just to mend, but to bless. Mothers brought their children's torn shirts and left with cloth that felt warmer. Farmers brought work clothes and swore they felt stronger wearing them afterward. The priest came too. He stood in the doorway, watching the sewing machine work by itself. His face was stern at first, then softened. I was wrong about you, Elias, the priest said quietly. You did not bring danger. You brought grace. Elias bowed his head. I only did what my mother taught me. So with love, not for gold. Days turned into weeks. The workshop never stopped glowing. Every morning, villagers found mended clothes on Elias's doorstep, each one touched by the golden thread. The poor and forgotten found comfort in the warmth of the fabric. The sick felt better when wrapped in the blessed cloth. One evening, as Elias sat by his window, he saw the floating lanterns again. They drifted through the village streets, gentle and peaceful. But this time he was not afraid. He knew what they were now. They were souls passing through, grateful and at peace. Mira sat beside him, sipping tea. Do you miss them? She asked softly. The spirits. Elias thought for a moment. I miss my mother, but I know she is at rest. That is enough. Months passed. Winter came to the mountains. Snow fell softly on Dharmapura, covering the roofs and roads in white. Elias's workshop remained warm, the golden thread still glowing faintly in the dim light. One cold morning, a traveler arrived at the village. He was a young man, thin and tired, with a heavy pack on his back. He walked through the snow until he reached Elias's door. He knocked softly. Elias opened the door and smiled. Come in, come in. You look frozen. The traveler stepped inside gratefully. He set down his pack and warmed his hands by the small fire. Thank you, grandfather. I have traveled far. Where are you going? Elias asked, pouring him hot tea. The traveler reached into his pack and pulled out an old robe. It was faded and torn, but still beautiful. I'm looking for the tailor who can mend this. My grandmother gave it to me before she died. She said a kind man once repaired it for her many years ago. She told me if I ever needed help, I should find him. Elias took the robe gently. His hands trembled. He recognized the stitches. They were his own, sewn decades ago when he was still young. Your grandmother, Elias whispered. What was her name? Amara, the traveler said. She lived in the valley below. She always spoke of a tailor in the mountains who sewed with a golden heart. Elias's eyes filled with tears. He remembered Amara, a young woman with a baby, desperate and poor. He had mended her only good dress so she could find work. That was 50 years ago. She remembered me, Elias whispered. She never forgot you, the traveler said. And she told me to finish what you started. The traveler stayed in Dharmapura for 3 days. In that time, Elias taught him to sew. He showed him how to thread the needle with care, how to stitch with intention, how to pour kindness into every seam. Cloth is not just fabric, Elias said as they worked together. It carries memory. It holds warmth. It remembers the hands that touched it. The young man listened carefully. His fingers were clumsy at first, but Elias was patient. By the 3rd day, the traveler had mended his grandmother's robe perfectly. He held it up to the light. The golden thread Elias had given him glowed softly in the seams. It is beautiful, the traveler whispered. Elias smiled. Now you carry her memory forward. And one day, you will teach another. The traveler bowed deeply. Thank you, grandfather. I will not forget this. He left the next morning, the mended robe folded carefully in his pack. Elias watched him walk down the snowy road until he disappeared into the mist. Mira stood beside Elias, her arms crossed against the cold. You gave him more than thread, she said. You gave him purpose. Elias nodded. That is what kindness does. It does not end. It only changes hands. That night, Elias sat at his sewing table one last time. His hands were old and tired now. His eyes could barely see in the dim light. But he picked up his needle and worked on one final piece of cloth. It was a small blanket, soft and warm. He stitched carefully, pouring all his love into every seam. When he finished, he folded it gently and placed it by the door. The next morning, Mira found Elias's workshop door open. She called his name, but there was no answer. She stepped inside. The sewing machine sat still and silent. The golden thread had stopped glowing. The fire had gone cold. On the table lay a folded note. Mira picked it up with shaking hands. The words were written in Elias's careful script. Kindness never unravels. Pass it on. Mira's eyes filled with tears. She looked around the workshop. Everything was neat and orderly, as if Elias had prepared it for someone else to use. She sat down in his chair and wept. The village had lost its tailor. But more than that, it had lost a light. Days passed. The villagers mourned Elias. They brought flowers to his workshop and told stories of how he had helped them. Children sang songs about the kind old man who sewed for free. The priest held a special prayer in the temple. But Elias's work was not finished. Mira, though she had never sewn before, sat down at his sewing machine. She picked up the needle and thread. Her hands were clumsy, but she remembered Elias's words. So with love, not for gold. She mended a torn shirt, then another, then a child's dress. Each stitch felt like honoring Elias's memory. Other villagers joined her. The widow from the hill, the old farmer, even the young ones who had once mocked Elias. Together, they kept the workshop alive. And on quiet nights, when the wind hummed through the bamboo groves, they swore they could still hear the gentle sound of Elias's needle, stitching kindness into the world. Years passed. Dharmapura changed, but the workshop remained. It became a place where the forgotten found help, where the poor found warmth, where anyone with a torn heart or a torn coat could come and leave with something mended. Travelers from distant villages heard the stories. They came seeking the workshop where kindness lived. Some brought clothes to mend. Others brought stories to share. And everyone left with a piece of golden thread, a reminder that kindness never dies. Mira grew old, but she never stopped sewing. She taught the children of Dharmapura to stitch with care. She told them about Elias, the tailor who sewed clothes for ghosts and brought peace to the forgotten. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Mira sat at the old sewing table. Her hands were tired, but her heart was full. She looked out the window and saw them, the floating lanterns drifting gently through the mist. She smiled. She knew what they were now, not something to fear, but something to honor. They were the souls Elias had helped, still watching over the village, still grateful. Mira picked up the small blanket Elias had made on his last night. She held it close and whispered, "Thank you, old friend. Your stitches still hold us together." The lanterns drifted past her window, glowing softly in the twilight. And in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could hear a voice, gentle and warm, like an old friend speaking from far away. Kindness never dies. It only changes who addresses. The story you have just heard is a beautiful folktale I heard long ago. I'm telling you to wake your minds to kindness, fairness, and how we should care for our orphans and hungry neighbors. Remember, every small act of love you give comes back to bless you. Sow kindness into the world, and the world will remember you. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for listening.